Welcome back to another episode of War in Cali. In this episode, I will detail a story of multiple deaths and revenge. Compton is a well-known city in LA County, from breeding many rappers, athletes, and also a battlefield for several gangs. Crips were formed in Compton in the 70s and had strong ties to each other, even being allies at a point, but by the 80s, many became rivals. Over several years, it was just Crip versus Pirus, but it became Crip on Crip wars like the Tragniew Crips and the Nutty Blocc Crips. Clarence, also known as Peanut, and Glenn, also known as LG, were active members of the Tragniew Crips, and they would go on a crime spree. So let's get into this case. At about 10 p.m. on May 20th, 2005, a 15-year-old named Marquise was playing basketball with several people in the Nutty Blocc's territory on South Harlan Avenue. Two men approached on foot and started shooting. Marquise was shot in his side and also near his right hip. He spent 2 weeks recovering in the hospital. After the shooting, the two men ran away. They were laughing and got in the back seat of a waiting Chevy Caprice, which was owned by Glenn. Bullet fragments were recovered at the scene. A ballistic analysis showed that the bullets were fired from 2 different guns. The bullet that struck Marquise was fired from a .357, which was later found out to be owned by Glenn. Other bullet fragments were also recovered at the scene, which was said to be a .32, which was later found out to be owned by Clarence. A man named Jota heard the gunshots, and he saw 2 men crossing the street. He identified Clarence as one of the men he saw get into the Caprice and drive away. 3 days later, a Tragniew Park member who was a close friend of Glenn was shot and killed. In a statement later given to the police following his arrest, Glenn said he was upset about the shooting, and that evening, he drove his Caprice into the Nutty Blocc Crips territory, which he had 2 other Tragniew Park members with him. They were looking for rival gang members to shoot. They were unsuccessful and drove home. Early the next morning, Jota was outside his home talking with his mom and also a third person. Clarence walked towards the group. He knelt down and fired more than 9 rounds. No one was struck. Jota saw Clarence get into Glenn's Caprice and they drove away. The following morning, Jota found a note on his truck which said, "Testify and everybody dies." Later that morning, Glenn drove back to the Nutty Blocc's territory. He was looking for a Nutty Blocc Crip to shoot. Glenn spotted Dante and said another gang member in his car. Witnesses then saw a man get out of Glenn's Caprice and run towards Dante firing a gun. Dante was chased by the gunman as he attempted to flee. He fell to the ground and the gunman continued firing the gun. He then got back inside the car and drove off with Glenn. Dante suffered 6 gunshot wounds. 2 of the wounds were in his back and hit his heart and also his lung, and the shooting was fatal. June 6, 2005. At around 10 p.m., a 16-year-old named Patrick and a 15-year-old named Samuel were walking near the intersection of Alondra and Central Avenue in Compton. 2 men, one of whom was identified as Clarence, approached Patrick and Samuel and asked them where were they from. One of the men made a diss to the Nutty Blocc Crips, and when Patrick replied that he was not a member of that gang, one of the men said, "This is Tragniew Park." As Patrick and Samuel walked away, Clarence and his friend began shooting. Patrick was struck in the leg and the right heel, and Samuel escaped injury. On June 23rd of 2005, following Glenn's arrest, deputies searched his Caprice. Deputies found a live round of a .32 caliber bullet lodged in the back seat. The bullet was the same type that deputies found in Clarence's .32 caliber revolver. The bullet that struck Marquise was fired from that similar gun. Deputies found a page of rap lyrics in Glenn's jail cell. The lyrics were written in code, in which was words used by the Tragniew Crips. The rap lyrics described the killing similar to Dante's. Glenn's phone calls were also recorded while he was incarcerated. In one of those calls, Glenn recited rap lyrics about shooting rival gang members. In the other phone calls, he used gang lingo, including addressing the person he was speaking to as cuz. So this put him on a gang enhancement charge. On July 20th, 2005, deputies saw Clarence walking in the area of Amanda Street in Los Angeles. When Clarence saw deputies, he ran away and he jumped the fence. The deputy saw a black handgun in his hand. Deputies later found Clarence at a nearby house, lying on the couch, and found a loaded .38 in the bedroom. When investigated both, Clarence and Glenn admitted to their crimes, but later recanted at trial. But with several witnesses, including some of their victims testifying, they both received life. But this story doesn't end here. On April 27, 2006, A 17-year-old named Anthony was shot to death. He sustained a gunshot wound to the back of the head, a wound to his chest, and also a gunshot wound to his left thigh, which this shooting was fatal. Anthony was the little brother to Clarence. At the time of the shooting, two women named Alejandra and Nkoshi and others heard multiple gunshots. Alejandra's sister Cynthia was the only one in the group who did not hear the gunshots because she was listening to music on her iPod. Immediately after they heard the shots, the shooter ran towards them, and he asked to use a cell phone to call someone for a ride. He told the girls there had been a shooting, but before they could hand over the cell phone, they heard sirens and he ran away. The sisters described the shooter as tall and slim, being between 5'9" and 5'11" in height. Alejandra told detectives that it was gaps in the shooter's teeth. Nkoshi later identified the shooter from a photo lineup. She even testified at a preliminary hearing and said that she recognized the shooter from school. On the day of the shooting, a man named Norman, a resident of the neighborhood, saw the shooter flying around the corner. He was looking crazy like somebody had just done something, he said. He knew him as DJ. Norman told the police that DJ was sweating like a bull, and his eyes were big, and he could see the whites of them. Norman told the police that DJ was with two other men, who told him to get in the house. Norman identified DJ from a photo lineup as the man he saw running around the corner. Norman told police that the day after he saw DJ running, DJ's stepfather Keith told him, "You need to lay low, and you need to keep your mouth shut." Norman felt threatened by Keith, his size, his facial expression, and his intensity, and also that the fact that he lived nearby. At trial, Norman recanted the statements that he made to the police. He also denied that he had been threatened. Another witness named Kevin, also a resident of the neighborhood, said he heard multiple gunshots. Right before the gunshots, he heard a kid plead, "Don't shoot." He saw a black male about 5'10" to 5'11" tall running away with a revolver in his hand. Kevin then saw the victim Anthony bleeding on the ground and shouted for somebody to call the paramedics. Another witness named Lionel looked out his bedroom window and saw two black males walking down the street. He heard a shot and saw one man on the ground. The shooter stood over the victim, he said, and shot him twice more. Then he ran away holding the gun. He described the shooter as tall and slim. The shooter stopped to talk to a group of people, and then he ran covering his face with a jacket. He said he put the gun in a sweater, and he was unable to identify the shooter from a photo lineup. A woman named Siobhan, who was a member of the Nutty Blocc Crips, the same gang that DJ was from, was convicted in September of 2007 on 2 counts of premeditated attempted murder and another case. She later agreed to testify in this case for a lower sentence. She testified that she had dated the deceased leader of the Nutty Blocc Crips, who had been feared and respected while he was alive. She said he had status and influence with the gang, so her relationship with him increased her rank. On the day of the shooting, she received a call from a fellow Nutty Blocc Crip who told her she better get the little homies out of her car because they just did something stupid. After they spoke, Siobhan called a younger member of the gang who also lived with her and used her car. Siobhan told him to meet her at her house with DJ. The three met at 9 p.m. that same evening. When Siobhan accused the younger members of doing something stupid out of her car, DJ interjected and said that he did it. DJ explained that he had shot someone in retaliation for the murder of his cousin Dante. Dante was known in the streets as Tiny No Good from Nutty Blocc. Siobhan told both men to clean out her car, and 2 weeks later, Siobhan still found bullet shells in the backseat of her car. At trial, she testified that DJ was the one who confessed to the murder. Detectives testified that Dante, known as Tiny No Good, who was DJ's cousin, was killed by Clarence from Tragniew Park, a rival gang member. Clarence was the older brother of Anthony, who was killed by DJ. For his role in the crime, DJ received 25 years to life. One's actions can lead to a whole cycle of violence, and that's exactly what happened in this story. A cycle of violence leading to death and retaliation. But that's the endless cycle of the streets. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to hype, like, comment, and subscribe for more.